What can I say? I am Space Jam. The whole movie. Hello there, humans. My name is Dael Kingsmill, and today I have a little bit of a fairy tale for you. That's right, it's a hilarious pun on the term fairy tale, but using my name instead of the word tale, because it rhymes. I know you're laughing. I know you're out there having a good chuckle. I can tell. Well, now that you've all calmed down from that raucous uproar of uncontrollable laughter, I was looking around today for a story to tell. I wanted to do a fairy tale. I've had some good recommendations recently, some requests, which I do plan to do. They're great stories, but also they're going to take a little bit longer. And using the prompt of ravens from Omar, I landed on a story called The Three Feathers. And actually, while we're speaking of creative prompts given by Omar, 13 Days, 13 Shorts is started. It's a Halloween creativity festival. It's a good time. I'll leave links, you should go check it out. Alright, the story of the three feathers. There once was a woman who was married to a guy, or at least she thought she was. She'd never actually seen him. He wooed her and would visit her and married her entirely in secret without ever showing his face. This is sounding familiar. And for a long time this woman, who by the way doesn't have a name, no one in this story has a name except for one person who's like a minor character, really, in the long run. The nameless woman was very happy with her marriage because her husband was very kind. That is, until some of her neighbors and friends and family started to question why exactly her lover and husband had never shown his face. Perhaps they pondered? Possibly both. Perhaps there's something wrong with him. Maybe he's hideous. Maybe he's a monster. Maybe you're in danger. Yet this is definitely sounding familiar. Now the woman had already had these kinds of doubts floating around in the back of her head, and as soon as other people were giving voice to them, giving her sideways glances down the street, that's when she decided to act on it. So that night, as she waited for her husband in their darkened bedchamber, she waited till she heard him coming in, and she surprised him by suddenly lighting a candle and whipping around to see what he looked like. Yeah, I've definitely heard this somewhere before. For people who don't know, this is very much the same opening sequence as the story of Eros and Psyche from Greek mythology. I've done a video on it, although that might have been one of my last videos on the Geek and Sundry Vlogs channel. I'll throw up a link to it. I don't know whether that link will be to an old Geek and Sundry Vlogs video, or whether, maybe I'll re-upload it on this channel. I think I have permission to do that, technically. At first, the man that the woman beheld was a gorgeous being, the most beautiful she'd ever seen. He was a stunner. But then very quickly, things went pear-shaped, or should I say bird-shaped rather. He turned into a bird. A gigantic brown bird. This is bird. This is what birds look like. He was angry. He was an angry bird. Oh wait, that's a game. Wow, that's an old reference now. Remember when Angry Birds was a thing? Ooh, boy oh boy, that was a time. And he said, "No, you have betrayed me. I must flee." "No," she said, "you're beautiful and you're good and I love you. Please stay. There's only one thing that you can do now. The only way that we can still be together is for you to prove your love, because of course it is. I'll do anything to stay with you. I love you. We're married. Let's stick to that thing. I think it was working well before I tried to trick you and see you. You have to hold down a job for 7 years and 1 day." What? Hold down a job? Yeah, sure. I guess I'll do it. Here you go. This is the place. Okay, great. Where are we? Yeah, no, this is where you're gonna work. You're gonna work here as a laundress for 7 years and 1 day. The woman inside is looking for someone to do the laundry. That's your job. You're gonna prove that you love me. And never in that time are you allowed to take the advances of other men. And never are you allowed to leave the job or lose the job. That's important. You gotta hold down the job. And you can never let anyone convince you to leave the job. But I feel like most of that is encompassed in the 2 base rules. I feel like you can work it out. What? Laundry? I can't do laundry. I don't know how to iron anything. I can't wash clothes. I don't know what I'm meant to separate into colors and whites. What counts as colors? Is gray a color? Clearly the woman had never had to do this in her entire life. Nah. That don't matter. All you gotta do, from under my wing, take 3 feathers from right next to my heart, right there. Take them from, yeah, heart feathers, right there, under my wing. All you gotta do is hold those 3 feathers in your hand and say, wait, what did she have to say? By the virtue of these 3 feathers from over the heart of my true love, I bid the thing happen. Like, whatever the thing is, you put that in there. That's the part of it that you fill in with whatever you want done, and it'll be done. The magic feathers. I'm a magic guy. Bird now. Thanks for that, by the way. This was gonna be the breeziest 7 years and 1 day ever. And he flew off. I was about to say never to be seen again, but I mean, you know, that's an exaggeration. 7 years and 1 day. We know what the time limit is. In the woman went, she talked to the mistress, said, hey, I hear you need a laundry gal. I'm your laundry gal. Sure, we'll give you a trial run, says the mistress. And so the woman goes off into the laundry room, shuts the door tight, closes all the blinds, pulls out the 3 feathers and says, by the virtue of these 3 feathers that I took from over the heart of my one true love, let the clothes, I guess, be like separated into the right groups and then washed and then like, I don't know, maybe do like a tumble dry thing for some of them, but only the appropriate ones, and then like, I don't know, dry them and separate and like, let's iron them and fold them as well, just to like be really thorough. And then she sat down leisurely on a chair and watched as the clothes began to float about her and do the work on her behalf, because she had magic feathers. And so of course she was the best laundress the household had ever had. She quickly became star favorite, and she just breezed through the first 4 years of this little, like, I don't know, trust task, proving you love Penelope style thing that's happening. But of course, as there always is, there's a problem. After these 4 years, various male servants from around the household began to fall in love, quote unquote love, with the woman, but no matter how many times they asked, she would turn them down. One of these servant men was the butler, the aging and rotund, shall we say, butler gentleman. One day as he was finishing up one of his chores, he decided to take a detour past the laundry room because he wanted to sort of check on his favorite girl, see how she's doing, maybe see if she'd changed her mind and wanted to date him. Which, okay. Persistence, not that cute. As he arrives outside, the whole place is shut up good and tight, and he can hear the woman's voice saying, by the power of Grayskull, I almost said, by the virtue of these 3 feathers, do all my laundry, blah, blah, blah. And he thinks, wow, that's really weird. And so he takes a little peek through the keyhole to the laundry room, which is the only thing left unsealed. Ow, what did I just do to my wrist? Ow. Oh boy. And what does he see? He sees the woman lounging about on a chair as all the clothes float about and wash themselves. And he sees an opportunity in this. That night he corners the woman and he says to her, I've seen what it is that you do, and once and for all you will be with me, or I will tell the mistress that you are a witch. And even if you don't get burnt at the stake, you will be fired. The woman's heart is in her throat. What's she supposed to do? She can't sleep with this guy, or she'll never see her one true love again. She can't afford to be fired, or she'll never make the 7 days in 1 year, and she'll never see her husband again. She can't breathe, everything's terrible, she needs to buy herself some time. And so she says, oh, but I could never be with someone who doesn't have any money. It was the first thing that she could think of. And the rotund butler says, oh, is that all? Well, I have £70 put aside by the master for me in my savings. Is that good enough for you? And the woman, suddenly getting an idea, says, yes. Yes, that'll do fine. So that night the butler goes and he collects his £70 and he collects the woman from the laundry room and begins leading her into the house and up the stairs or down the stairs. Where do the servants sleep? Upstairs, downstairs was the name of the show. That doesn't give me any hints. Toward his bedroom, let's just say. He hands over the £70 and the woman says, oh, I've just remembered. I've left all the blinds open on the laundry room. They're gonna be clattering around all night in the wind, and the mistress and the master, they're gonna be kept up by it. I'd better go deal with that. I'll be right back. I'll just go handle this. But she knew that the rotund butler was that particular kind of douchebag who believe so wholeheartedly in their own chivalry despite doing scumbaggy things that he would offer to do it instead. Oh, no, that's fine. I'll go, I'll shut the blinds for you, and I will be right back. He trots off to shut the blinds, but of course this leaves the woman alone on the stairs, and she pulls out her 3 feathers and she says to them, by the virtue of these 3 feathers which I pulled from above the heart of my one true love, let the blinds never close all night, but only blow in the wind, and let the butler never be able to close them until morning comes. And so it was. The butler went and he tried to close the blinds, but every time he turned to walk, he could hear them clattering in the wind. He'd turn around, they were open again. As he goes to try to close them one more time, they clatter in the wind and they knock him around the head. He gets his nose shut in them. It's a farce! And it just doesn't stop until morning, when finally he's so embarrassed that he just goes back to bed by himself. The woman's already gone by this point, and he just never brings it up to anyone because he's so embarrassed about what happened. So the woman not only gets her way, keeping her job, not having to sleep with this skeezy dude, but also she gets his 70 pounds out of it. It's a pretty sweet deal. So that's pretty nice, and it covers her for about 6 months until the coachman also decides that he's in love with her, and also comes to visit her after he finishes feeding his horses one day, and he also hears her say, by the virtue of these 3 feathers which I pulled from above the heart of my one true blah 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 blah. And the coachman also looks through the keyhole and sees her lounging as all the clothes flutter about the room. Once again, this supposed nice guy who supposedly loves her corners her after work that day and says, I've seen what you can do. I know that you're a witch and I will tell the mistress. And if she doesn't have you burned at the stake, she will have you fired. That is, of course, if you don't agree to be with me. So once again, the woman said, I could never be with a man who doesn't have money. And the coachman replied, is that all? I have 40 pounds saved up with the master. I can go and collect them tonight. And so the agreement was struck. The coachman went to collect his savings from the master, and after work that day, he went and collected the woman from the laundry room. He handed over his 40 pounds and began to lead her towards his lodging when she suddenly realized, I left the clothes on the washing. I'm such an idiot. It'll blow off in the night. Don't worry about it, I'll be right back. I'm just gonna go handle that, take the washing in, it won't take a tick. Nah, don't even worry about it, says the coachman. I'll go get the washing off the line for you. It's cold and windy out there. Your feeble constitution wouldn't handle it. You'll catch your death. Best left to a man at night. And as he disappeared, the woman pulled out the 3 feathers and she said, by the power of Grayskull, by the virtue of these 3 feathers that I pulled from may the washing flap about on the line and resist being taken down by the coachman and stop him from taking it down until morning comes. And of course her will be done. The coachman gets out to the line and everything just starts like whipping him in the face, and things blow off their pegs and he has to run and chase them, and the sheets, the bed sheets, all wrap around him and get him all tangled. And you know, the next thing he knows, it's dawn and he has to go and feed the horses, and he's just so embarrassed about not being able to complete this simple task that he just never brings it up. The woman had taken his money and gone to bed because she knew that it would all work out. And so she was covered for another 6 months. She was covered until the footman, who apparently was quite an honest kid and was genuinely in love with her, or at least he thought he was, went to go check on his supposed beloved in the laundry room, and he didn't hear her say anything. He just thought that it'd be fun to peek through the keyhole, and apparently she hadn't fixed it by now, which maybe a mistake. And what does he see? Lo and behold, magic laundry goings on, while she sits in her lazy boy off to the side. Now the footman, he's really troubled by this. So without speaking to the laundry woman first, he goes to the master and he collects all of his savings, and then he takes them to her in the laundry room and he says, look, I have to go and tell the master and the mistress what I saw you doing. I'm so compelled by my concern about this witchcraft that I could not feel comfortable not telling them the truth, unless maybe you agreed to marry me. The woman is taken aback and says, oh, James. Because of course he's the one with the name in this story. James, I don't think you understand. I can't marry you. And James waves away her concerns and says, no, you don't understand. I've saved up a bunch of money and I've just withdrawn it. I know that you've been working here for just as long as I have, and you've probably saved up a bunch of money too. We can combine it, get married, and we can just live off that. Or I mean, I guess if you want to keep working, we can do that too. But if you don't agree to marry me, I will have to tell them about the witchcraft. Which, I mean, can we talk about this sort of nice guy TM behavior? Yeah, he's honest and really in love with her, but he's still gonna potentially have her burned at the stake unless she agrees to marry him. What, just because it's marriage instead of sex, suddenly it's honorable? Like, suddenly it's not manipulating a woman into doing something she doesn't really consent to? Great work, James. You're a real nice guy. Great guy. I'm side-eyeing James hard. The woman tries for a while to convince James that this isn't gonna work, but he is so persistent that eventually she just says, James! Look, this has been a bit of a shock to the system. I'm feeling a little bit ill from it all. Could you maybe, I don't know, get me a brandy from the master's cellar just to steady my nerves? And James nods and stands up and goes to collect the brandy. And while he's gone, quickly the woman pulls out the feathers and she says, by the virtue of these 3 feathers which I plucked from above the heart of my one true love, please make James's hand unsteady as he pours the brandy, unless he pours it into his own mouth. And so meanwhile, James in the cellar pulls out the brandy in a glass and begins to pour, and he just can't make it into the glass. Everything's sloshing out onto the ground around him, and he only gets a couple drops in before suddenly everything's slipping out of place, and he takes a few sips himself to try to steady himself, but after like a half hour of trying to manage this, the master comes downstairs to find out why everything smells like brandy, and just finds James in the cellar reeking of alcohol and his expensive brandy sloshed all over the ground. James did not have a good night. He wasn't fired, but he didn't have a good night. The master gave him a bit of a beating. However, the master did then go to visit his wife and say, I think you need to fire that laundry woman because something has gotten into all of my manservants ever since she came here. Are you crazy? Said the mistress. She is the best laundry woman we have ever or will ever have. And the two of them have a huge fight, but eventually the master loses out because the mistress is not going to lose her just incredibly gifted laundress. Maybe she's born with it, maybe it's magic feathers. And so the woman was left with James's savings as well. Then again, one day, 6 months down the line, while waiting for the master to come out and go on a trip, the coachman, the butler, and the footman are all standing around together, waiting for him, when they see the woman walk past with a basket full of laundry. Suddenly, James chokes up and starts blubbering about how that woman is wicked. She stole all my money and she somehow got me a thrashing as well. Did she? Says the coachman. Well, that's nothing compared to what she did to me. She took all my savings, and I didn't get a wink of sleep that whole night because I was out trying to get in the washing for her. The butler perks up hearing this and says, that's nothing compared to what she did to me. Not only did she take my savings, but I was up all night trying to close the shutters of the laundry room, and my nose got snapped in there. Having discovered all of this, the 3 of them agreed that they would tell on her the minute the master came out, tell him about the witchcraft, and get her in trouble. But the woman was walking past and heard this. She stopped behind the coach and, quickly having to think of something, pulled out the 3 feathers and whispered to them, by the virtue of these 3 feathers which I plucked from above the heart of my blah blah whatever it is, let the 3 of them begin to argue about who's had it worse. Let a fight break out amongst them until they wind up wrestling each other in the pond. As she requested, so it was. The 3 men began to argue until eventually the footman was punching the butler in the face and giving him a black eye, and the coachman was like trying to drag them apart, and eventually they did end up wrestling each other into the duck pond. Finally, the master comes out and asks them what's going on, but they're all shouting over each other and saying, no, I want to tell my story. Your story's stupid. Meanwhile, the laundry woman is standing at the side, giggling at the sight of the whole thing, and the master turns to her and asks what is going on. And she tells the master, basically, honestly, that the 3 of them were all angry at her for not wanting to date them, and so they'd decided to make stories about her to get her in trouble, to get her fired or worse. But their egos were too big and they couldn't decide who had the better story, so they began to fight over it. But she made sure to say, they already look ridiculous, they're all drenched. there's no need to punish them any more than they've already punished themselves. At which point the 3 manservants looked entirely sheepish and came to the conclusion that they should really just keep their mouths shut and let the woman do her work until she finished her run of 7 years and 1 day. Really, they should be thankful because, I mean, those 3 feathers are basically a death note. She could have said, you know, by the virtue of these 3 feathers, kill the hell out of that guy who's about to try to get me burnt at the stake. You know? Like, she's been pretty lenient. And she did get to have her full run of 7 years and 1 day, because at this point the master went to his wife, the mistress, and said, you know what, I think you were right about that girl. She is very wise, and you were very wise to keep her on board. And so she worked, quote unquote, for the rest of her years, served her time, and on the 7-year and 2nd day, finally her one true love arrived again, no longer a gigantic brown bird, but once again, his beautiful, handsome, human self. And the master and mistress were so happy for the woman that they called all the servants together to bid her farewell on the front steps of the house. And as she was leaving, the woman handed over the 70 pounds that the butler had given her and said, thank you. That is for your service to me of closing the shutters. And the butler went red in the cheeks. As she passed the coachman, she handed over his 40 pounds and said, thank you. This is for the service you did to me of bringing in the washing that night. I know it was difficult. And the coachman took the money and averted his gaze. And finally she passed James the footman and she handed over 100 pounds and said, you know what, James? That is the most expensive glass of sherry that I have never received. And she went, and she lived happily ever after, and that's the end of the story. I hope that you enjoyed it. I haven't done a fairy tale in a while, so if you're newer, you may not have seen one before. I have a playlist. I'll stick it up in the end card so that you can watch more of them if you'd like to. If you did enjoy the video, you know how YouTube works. You can show your appreciation in all the places. If you're in a position to financially support the channel, and also if you want to, because you certainly don't have to, I do have a Patreon, which is linked in the description below. Apart from that, I do believe that's it. I'm done. Email this to your grandma and I will see you some other time. I can't really, there's a lot of mess here. Walking out is gonna be difficult. What is in my pocket? String or nothing! Lifeline's 24-hour telephone crisis support service 13 11 14. If you need help, go get help.